Well, hello, friends, and welcome to City Impact. My name is Dwight Habermel, and I have with me a good friend from the City Impact Network here in Canada, Dave Witt. And Dave is from Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, and he loves the Lord, he loves his city, and has been a real encouragement to me as we've talked together about reaching our cities and bringing the church together to work towards health and harvest. Had a chance, Dave, to be in Hamilton with you at a conference last year. That was amazing.
It was great. It's great to have you there, and fun to bring people together in that way.
I was really so excited about, how many churches were represented there that day, and the sense of passion to be together, and all that was going on. Tell us about True City Network and what's happening in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada.
No, thanks, Dwight. True City is we're into our 20th year of being a network. So I started back in 2004. Started very small. There was a group of churches that I was interacting with at the time around how we see our congregations get engaged beyond the walls of our buildings, beyond the walls of our churches. How do we get a sense of what God's heartbeat for our city is? Just this recognition that God has a deep shalom intention, a full flourishing intention for our cities, and that he's calling us as the church to be engaged in that. And there were a number of churches that were resonating with that reality, but unsure of how to proceed. And I had been interacting with a number of them, and at a key point, 3 of those churches said, we appreciate the ways that you're interacting with us, but we'd really like to interact with each other more. And could you help facilitate opportunities for us as churches to connect with each other more regularly, to find ways to collaborate? And that group grew fairly quickly from 3 to 6 churches, and they began a process of identifying some of the specific ways that God would want us to be involved in our different neighborhoods and the city. We've come to call those missional frontiers, and they would be things like the reality that people within our congregations and in the community were facing mental health challenges, and how could we respond to that, and that refugees were coming to our city, and how do we best welcome and walk alongside refugees. That single parent families were a big reality, and how do we walk well with single moms especially. And one of the things that I'd say was really clear was that there was a lot of information out there about how to respond to different challenges. There were a lot of social agencies that were doing some great work, but there wasn't a lot out there that was specifically talking about how congregations could respond to those issues, and what it looked like to have church-based responses to that. And so getting leaders from these churches in a room together to talk about, this is what it looks like for a congregation to respond to that, and what's our particular calling as a congregation. Because churches have things that they do really well. I think churches are really set up to respond relationally to the issues that their communities face. They can walk alongside of people really well. They don't always do the best at being primary service providers, but they connect people to service providers really well. And so just talking through those kinds of things and connecting churches around areas of passion was what launched this network of churches.
No, that's exciting. It's an incredible story, and it was incredible to be there back last year when you could actually look around the room and hear the interaction and stories of so many different denominations coming together as one and talking about their city and talking about how they can work together. We toss around the term collective impact. How would you describe what's going on there in terms of collective impact?
Yeah, I think I think in our context, what we've realized is that there's certain areas, there's certain things that we can do really well by doing them together. And then there's things that we work well to cooperate in, where we share information and we interact with each other, but that we have to do our specific thing in our specific community, because each of these churches is in a different geographic location in the city. So sometimes we come together around a specific issue. I think about the Syrian refugee crisis as maybe one of those situations where we found that a number of churches were sponsoring refugees at the same time, and that by coming together we could resource each other in a way that allowed each of us to do the work that we felt called to do better, because we were interacting with each other. We could share contacts and there were great opportunities that way. And so I think collective impact is this idea of recognizing the ways in which we're working at some of the same things, and that we can do them better if we are in communication with each other and drawing on the resources that each other has, so that we do what we're called to do well in our place, kind of alongside of those who are doing the same kind of work but in a different location with a different group of people.
Now, you're very inspiring listening to the stories of what's happening in Hamilton, and I'm sure that a lot of our listeners are getting stirred up about their cities too. Stories play an important role. I mean, Jesus used stories. You and I tell stories when we're communicating with others. What role does storytelling play in advancing the whole idea of collective impact or the church working together in the city?
Yeah, stories have been central to the way that we've done this collaborative work, this collective impact work that we've been doing from really near really at the start. I'm not sure that we had understood why they were so powerful. We just recognized that they were the best way to communicate. But I think since over the course of that time, we've come to realize that really our brains are hardwired to take in story. It's the best way of keeping information in our heads is to have it connected to a story, and so we've really doubled down on that, in some specific ways, recognizing that there's lots of different ways to tell stories. That just in regular daily communication we use stories, but that sometimes it's important to recognize, that's an important story, and we want you to share that story in a kind of public setting. And and we've got some people who are good storytelling coaches, who've learned how to help coach people in presenting a story in a particularly powerful way. We've done some video storytelling, had some gifted videographers that have helped us with that. So that, I think what makes stories so powerful for us is it's a way of sharing something that God's been doing in one setting in a way that is translatable into another setting. So when I hear someone tell a story of what's happened in their community, it gives me this opportunity to try it on, if you will, and say, oh, well, what might that look like if that story happened in my community, and how would it be the same, and how would it be different? Right. And that's been a really important way that we've seen churches, take on a specific ministry. There was a church that started doing a meal once a week for their community as a way to connect to those who were in need in their community. And so they had a lunch each week. And one of the other churches heard about that and decided they weren't going to do a lunch. They were going to have a coffee break on a Friday morning. But it was the same basic idea of creating community and an accessible community for people in need in their neighborhood. But they could do it in a slightly different way, and that fit their community better. So I think it's those kinds of ways in which stories work that's really powerful.
Well, that's very interesting. And you basically have gatherings in different places and times and media and whatever way you can come up with to tell a story or to get a story out there. You do that.
Yeah.
Well, in fact, that's actually what we're hoping to do with this video series, is to go across Canada and interview what God's doing in various different cities across our nation, hoping that the stories are going to be inspiring for others to initiate city impact initiatives or collective impact initiatives. How important is interdenominational collaboration, and why would you say it's important?
Yeah, in some ways I'd say we fell into that, but I've come to recognize how important it is. And so we were working with a group of churches at the start, all the 3 churches from 3 different denominations who shared a common passion for reaching their neighborhoods. But as we continued to find ways to work together, we found that these different denominational settings have different strengths and different blind spots, and by being together, these churches can bring to the table different things than the other churches can. And so I think diversity is a really important but undervalued reality that God intends for the church to model. I think it takes different kinds of churches to reach a city. That you don't want all the churches to be exactly the same, because different churches reach different people, and but diversity can make it difficult to at points to connect with each other because we're in our own silos. And so I think creating that interdenominational space allows, it's a great witness. I think that's been one of the things we've seen, is that the people in our city are surprised when they hear that these churches from different denominations are actually working with each other. Yes. That's probably a bit of a sad commentary, but the witness of it has been encouraging. That people go, that's so good. We think churches probably should be working together, and I think that it really broadens. It's the body image in the New Testament. I think usually when we talk about the body, we think it within a congregation, but what I've found is that it works really well in terms of between congregations, so that there are, each of the different congregations stewards a gift that they bring to the table, and it's really important for us to be receiving those gifts, letting them encourage us and challenge us, and so working across those divides, I think, is a powerful way to live out the gospel in our place.
That's really awesome. And I am sure that when you're looking at collective impact, sorry about that. When you're looking at collective impact and bringing the church together across denominational lines, in a city, there are probably some challenges, I would imagine.
Just a few.
It's probably not just a simple put out a poster and it happens. So what are some of the challenges that you've encountered in moving collective impact concepts and initiatives forward in your city?
Yeah, I think one of the most challenging realities is that I find congregations struggle to sustain outward facing initiatives over time. That there's things congregations are really good at, and then there's things that we're not so good at, and I think the nature of congregational life, you can easily become inwardly focused, and we know we should be engaged, beyond the walls, but it's hard to find the energy to do that sometimes, and so we've found that what I would call institutional memory can be very short in a congregation when it comes to outreach initiatives. And so you have someone who's been very involved, say with welcoming refugees, and then they move to a different congregation. They move from town, or they take on a new role within the church, and so they're no longer involved, and the churches struggle to keep actively sustaining those initiatives. And so by bringing people together from different churches, I think that's been one of the strengths of that is that it helps bridge some of those gaps. And it's also been a way that we've been able to connect some of our good parachurch ministries in the city with churches and allow them to bring in some of the expertise that's needed. And so that's probably one of the biggest challenges is just sustaining. And I'd say that's been particularly true through this COVID era, that COVID really shut a bunch of things down, and it's been hard and slow to get those things started again. And there's been a lot of turnover of personnel. And so that's, I'd say, probably the biggest challenge. Another challenge that I'd identify is finding the right tension between formal and informal connection for the churches. That so much of what's good and best and what's happened in our context through True City have been informal connections that have been made as people were in the same place at the same time and realized that they shared a passion for something. Wasn't anything that anyone could have engineered, but it happened naturally by those people being together. But in order for that to happen, you still have to have formal plans for when you're going to get together and how you're going to see partnership happen. And so there's enough activity within congregational life that people usually aren't looking for extra things to do. So the idea of, well, can you come to this other meeting to connect with other churches is sometimes hard for churches to make the space for that. And so right. How you do that in a way that there's good regularity to it, but without it overwhelming internal initiatives of the church has been an important tension to be living into that I'd say we always struggle to know how best to do that. And then, the other challenge I'd identify is that for a lot of us who grew up within evangelicalism, separatism was kind of the water we drank. We were suspicious of anyone who wasn't part of our group, and I think that DNA right. continues on within the way that our churches function. And so all too often, people will choose to separate as their first impulse, as opposed to coming together as your first impulse.
Richard Long actually has an amazing story on one of our other podcasts that center around, city impact that we need to listen to. It speaks directly to what you're talking about.
Yeah, and I know Richard has lived into that reality for a number of years, so I think just the encouragement to have the first default response from us to be, let's do this together. Honestly, there are times and places where we shouldn't do things with another group, where there's warning signs that that's not a healthy partnership. But but that's the exception rather than the rule in my experience. And we too often write groups off before we even get to know them. And when we get together, we find that they love Jesus and they're passionate about seeing the kingdom come, and they have differences from us, but they're not differences that should separate us when it comes to pursuing the kingdom for our city together.
That's exciting. I can appreciate some of the things you've shared as we've been working here in Halifax and in Nova Scotia to bring things together. I recognize a lot of the various different challenges that you're sharing about we experience here too, and I'm sure other city leaders experience across the nation. But it's a fight that's worth fighting for in faith. It's a pursuit that's worth the perseverance to continue to do. Tell me, how has being involved in the city leadership and collective impact influenced and affected you personally in your own journey?
Yeah, it's been a really rich journey for me. I think one of the things about what I get to do is I have a front row seat to just different places where God's at work in the city, and part of my role is to kind of survey what's happening in the city and pay attention, keep my ear to the ground of what's percolating, and that just gives me the opportunity to come alongside of groups and hear firsthand how they're experiencing God, and that can't help but have a positive impact on you personally when you're hearing those kinds of stories, and it just broadened my sense of how the Spirit's at work, just to get a bigger picture of the diversity of ways that the Spirit of God is moving and wants to move among us, and so that's been powerful, and I think Jesus has gotten bigger for me in the process. There's this scripture in Revelation 1 where John has this experience with Jesus where he sees Jesus walking among the lampstands, and that's just a picture of Jesus walking among the churches, and I feel like that's been some of the opportunity that I've had is to connect with these churches and see Jesus through their eyes, and that's made who Jesus is bigger for me, and that's been very, very rich as well.
Well, we've got about 2 or 3 more minutes before our time is up. Dave, what encouragement might you have to someone who's listening right now who might be thinking about, how do I, they've got a passion for their city, how do I do this where I live? What would you suggest for that person? Just as some initial steps and ideas.
I think just from our experience, one thing I would say is sometimes people think you've got to get all the churches involved to get started. And I just haven't found, I found that actually it worked better for us to start with a small group of churches that were willing to collaborate with each other. And then when you got started for other churches to then join in as they saw how you were doing something and getting tangible stuff started. I think we make a mistake if we're waiting for everybody to be willing together to get started on these things, and so that would be one encouragement that I'd have, and probably the other encouragement is just the reality that there that congregational life is such a powerful it is the place that community happens at its most fundamental for the church, but that it's always been God's intention, from the early church on, for those congregations to be in relationship with each other, to be connecting with each other. And so this isn't something new that we're trying out by getting collaboration to happen. I think we're seeing some new initiative. There's some fresh wind around collaborating together. But you read the book of 1 Corinthians, and there's a group of house churches in Corinth that aren't getting along with each other, and Paul is writing to say, hey, this is of first importance that you guys connect with each other, your different churches connect with each other. And so I think it's something that's been part of who the church is in places since the very beginning. And so it's an important, it's close to God's heart, and worth pursuing.
Dave, this has been so good. I've really enjoyed our conversation today. Dave Witt, Hamilton, Ontario, leading a city movement there with a whole team of folks. Great things happening. Dave, thank you for taking the time to share the story and the journey with us
thank
today.
you for having me.
And we'll see you next time. Yeah, you bet. We'll see you next time on City Impact.